So class, I want to give you a run through this and don't get too worried about it. I think I can explain it quite well. I know this is small, but you'll get the sheet. So what I want to do is talk about charging by contact. So we know that when we've got our various rods, when you're rubbing them, that is charging by friction. This is going to be talking about charging by contact when you're touching, and then when you do something like touch a balloon to a wall, that's charging by induction. Are three kinds of charging. So this says the transfer of electric charge from one substance to another by touch. That's what charging by contact is. So in this example, what I want to show you is charging a pith ball negatively. So how are you going to go about charging a pith ball negatively? Now you notice I've got my pith ball electroscope. It's just kind of my friend here in the corner. I won't be able to show it at the moment, but you'll be able to follow along. So let me just reveal what I've got here, and I think that this should make good sense to you. Let me just give that a little more of a focus. So here is the electroscope, and I'm showing that it is neutral. I'm showing it's neutral by two positives and two negatives. All right, so that makes it a neutral pith ball. And so what I've done is I've rubbed my ebonite rod with fur, and that's charging by friction, and I've created this big negative charge on my ebonite rod. So you're going to see what's going to happen is in the next picture. Oh my, there's a lot going on here. What happens is as you bring that negative rod close, you can see that there's a big negative charge here. If you're these two electrons, so remember the two electrons from up here, if you're these two electrons, you're going, oh man, I am so repelled by those negative charges. And remember, you're in orbits around the atom. And so you actually move back, and that leaves the two positive charges there. Now remember, protons, the positive charges from the protons, and protons are locked in the nucleus. They're not going anywhere. And so what happens is that creates a positive face. So the pith ball is still technically neutral, but you've created a charge separation. And so now you can see that that draws the pith ball, it actually draws up towards the rod because it's attracted. And so there you go. Now, if the rod gets too close or you actually touch it, then what happens is electrons can hop off. And if electrons hop off onto the pith ball, then you can see what happens in the third diagram down here is that then you end up with a negative pith ball. You still just have two positives. Remember, you can't add positives. Positives are locked in a nucleus, but you've picked up negatives. And so here's your negative rod. When you go to bring that negative rod back, then this time the pith ball is repelled, because there are so many negatives here and there's so many negatives here, they really just can't get away like they could up here. And so you get a repulsion. So that when you do this, when you go through the series of diagrams, what happens is you have an initial attraction, there is a touch, electrons hop off, and then ultimately there is a repulsion. And so I have charged this pith ball negatively by touching it with the ebonite rod. So it is exactly the same thing with the positive charging of a pith ball, except of course in reverse. So I'm just going to run this through fairly quickly. And so, okay, we're going to charge a pith ball positively. So once again, we're going to start out with a neutral pith ball, two positives, two negatives. Now I've got my acetate rod and I'm going to charge it up positively. I do that by rubbing it with paper towel, charging by friction. The textbooks always say to use silk, but to be honest, the best thing is paper towel. So I've got my positive rod. So what's going to happen if I bring it up close to the pith ball electroscope? Well, the electrons are highly attracted to that positive charge. So I'm trying to show you that the electrons move forward, and that draws the pith ball towards the acetate rod. And so once again, you create that effect of a charge separation. It's like you got this negative face, and so there's an attraction because a negative and a positive attract. Now, if you get close enough and you touch, then of course those electrons will hop off. Why wouldn't they? They're attracted to this positive rod. Now, if you remove the rod away, then what you've got is you've got a pith ball that ends up being positively charged. It's lost its electrons, and those two electrons that ended up jumping onto the acetate rod, they don't they don't make much of a difference. There's such a big charge on that rod. So you could charge the rod up again or just bring it back, and so then you can see once again, well, now remember, this is positively charged. You bring up a positively charged acetate rod and they repel. And so that's how you charge a pith ball positively. You touch it quite simply with the positive rod. And the way that you charge a pith ball negatively is quite simply you touch it with the negative ebonite rod. So I hope that helps. And if we ever get back together again, we can get out this equipment and you can try.